to Metzger Collection. Today, as part of our art history series, we will be talking about Egypt. Personally, the Egypt exhibit is one of my favorites here at the Metzger Collection because it's unlike any other. Their art is fascinating and elaborate. There's so much that we can learn from this creative, innovative culture from their art. Egyptian art focuses on two things. First, to glorify their gods and direct people towards the afterlife, and two, to affirm and implement the cultural conventions of the day. Clearly for Egypt, art was a form of communication. Even hieroglyphs, a form of writing, can be considered an art form in many ways, because little symbols will represent either a sound or an idea. So even the way that they explain their ideas and present them to other people is artistic in nature. I hope you enjoy this walk through art history and the art of Egypt. Hieroglyphs were used most frequently to decorate temples and tombs, and in fact the name hieroglyph means sacred carving because of this usage. On that note, it would be very wrong to look at Egyptian art and ignore their architecture. So here is a photo of a step pyramid, which is from a print that we have. And so Egyptians built pyramids because they believed that the pharaohs could travel to the afterlife through the top of the pyramid, and then if they decide to come back, then the pyramid would provide an easily recognizable structure. Because a pharaoh may decide to come back to the pyramid, that is why there was a lot of wealth stored in there. So eventually, though, pyramids were no longer used for burying pharaohs because while they would be an easily recognizable structure for the pharaoh to come back, it was also a very easily recognizable structure for grave robbers, and a lot of wealth was stolen as the tombs were raided. There's only one tomb that was found untouched in the Valley of Kings, which was King Tut's tomb, and here I will show you his throne that they found in his tomb, and here you can see that it is very ornate, very elaborate. Now that we are taking a bit of a closer look at this throne, we can notice the scene depicted on the back. King Tut was the son of King Akhenaten, who I will tell you about shortly. While his father instated exclusive worship of Aten, he reversed this reform. The throne was made early on in his reign, while the religious reforms were still going on. The back of his chair shows King Tut seated with his wife, who anoints him with perfume, while Aten shines down on them. This miniature replica of King Tut's throne shows his power, authority, status, and wealth. The original was made of wood, covered in gold, and adorned with silver, colored glass, and semi-precious stones. One thing to note is that the Valley of Kings was the more discreet burial grounds of the pharaohs, because at this point pyramids were no longer used. However, grave robbers still raided almost every tomb except King Tut's. Storytime. Before we get into too many of the artifacts, I want to tell you guys a little bit about one of the pharaohs that his changes in Egyptian culture and the way that he used art really exemplifies the two goals of Egyptian art: to glorify the gods and promote cultural structures. Akhenaten was a pharaoh from the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and he was a more unusual pharaoh. He liked to show himself in scenes of domestic tranquility. He loved his family, he stopped human sacrifices, and was quite the patron of the arts. And here we have a picture of him with his family here. He also gave Egypt the first glimpse of monotheism, because he undercut the entire pantheon of gods in Egypt and replaced it with the worship of one god, Aten. And in order to fuel these cultural changes, he chiseled off the names of all the other gods and replaced it with the symbol of the sun god, Aten, who he dedicated all the worship to, who his symbol was a picture of the sun with rays extending down like hands. Many have wondered why Akhenaten decided to actually cut out the entire pantheon. Perhaps it was because he wanted to give all worship to his god, but in doing so he also undercut the entire priesthood, which gave him much more power, and he was able to make these changes to the cultural structures. Nonetheless, whatever his motivation was, art was a way that fueled these changes and allowed them to be established, though in the next generation his son brought back the entire pantheon. Egyptians were skilled craftsmen. That can be seen in any number of their art pieces, but we can see, as in sharp contrast to some of the earlier art, they mastered the accurate proportions of the human body. The gods that they worshipped, they represented in elaborate statuettes, as we can see in this Anubis statuette, and it was a careful blend between humans and animals. But the accuracy in the human form was very important to the Egyptians. Nonetheless, because they focused so much on getting everything just right, musculature correct, and the lengths as correct as well, sometimes their art looks very pasted together, especially with the two-dimensional pieces. So if you want to stand like an Egyptian in some of the old temple paintings, you would position your feet one way, turn your torso another way, and then look to the other side. So it's quite the fun way to stand, and feel free to try that at home as well. But keep an eye out for that interesting Egyptian posture as we look at some of the more two-dimensional pieces of art coming up. Into looking at some more art pieces, here are a few things that we should look out for. These are the conventions of Egyptian art. First off, size matters. Size will tell us who is important, and the minor figures will be shown as smaller. So it is an indicator of status as well as importance of who to be paying attention to in this piece of art. And the main figures are also shown with parted legs. Most often you will see gods with parted legs as well as whatever the individual is. There is a continual theme of guiding someone into the afterlife, as that was promoting the cultural structures of today. The afterlife and the idea of the afterlife fueled a lot of Egyptian society. There was also a very careful set of proportions, like I noted before, and men had darker skin than women often in these pictures. One of the pieces that we have that very much typifies the conventions of Egyptian art is the victory tablet of King Narmer. For a bit of historical context, Egypt was divided between Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and King Narmer was believed to be the very first one to unify them. So this victory tablet commemorates the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and is over 2 feet in height and is double-sided. On one side he wears the white crown of Upper Egypt, and on the other he wears the red crown of Lower Egypt. And we are going to be taking a look at the white crown side, where he is shown smiting a foe with a mace, likely intending to crush his skull. Lovely. Anyways, let's take a closer look at this one. We can notice that King Narmer takes up a majority of the space on this tablet, whereas we also see a sandal bearer on the right who is significantly smaller. So this is an indication that King Narmer is the one with the most authority here and the one that we need to be paying attention. The 2 slain foes are also below his feet to show his power, and as we can tell, their size, they're much smaller to indicate that they are of much less importance. Additionally, main figures are shown with parted legs, hence this describes King Narmer's stance. In Egyptian art, as I mentioned before, desires to honor the gods in their artwork, and here 2 bulls are shown at the top, which likely represents the sky god Bat, since that was the animal associated with Bat. And the falcon god Horus is shown binding the foe's head from the marsh, which would also represent Lower Egypt. The second to last piece in today's tour is a scene from the Book of the Dead. You can hardly do a video on art history in Egypt and not talk about the Book of the Dead. So if you are not aware of what this is, the Book of the Dead is basically an instruction manual for the afterlife. During the New Kingdom period, wealthy Egyptians were buried with the Book of the Dead because it also contains spells that would help them attain this. In this particular scene, we see the deceased being led by the jackal-headed Anubis to have his heart weighed against the feather of truth. And only because Anubis manipulates the scales is his heart able to be shown as lighter than the feather of truth. And then he is welcomed into the afterlife. As far as conventions go, we can see that there are many gods depicted here, and that the gods as well as The deceased are shown with parted legs to give indication of who we need to be paying attention to here. Additionally, this piece honors the roles of the gods in people's lives and affirms the cultural structure of the idea of the afterlife and why the different processes that happen surrounding death. For the final piece in today's tour, I want to challenge you to be able to see how this piece might typify some of the conventions of Egyptian art that we already discussed. So comment down below what you notice. I will put up on the screen the picture and the conventions that we had been talking about earlier. This is a reconstructed scene from the tomb of Nakhet, and it shows Nakhet hunting and fishing with his family. I hope you enjoyed today's journey throughout the art of Egypt, and don't forget to try standing like an Egyptian at home, liking, commenting, and sharing with your friends and family this video, and I hope to see you all next week.